Welcome everyone to Luxor. I'm on the west bank of the Nile, a paradise for the explorers and ancient history lovers. You can find here the most famous mortuary temples of Hatshepsut, Seti, Ramesses II and Ramesses III, but today we'll explore temples almost never visited by tourists, the hidden gems of ancient Egypt. Our first stop is Deir el-Shelwit, a small but well-preserved temple of Isis, 4 kilometers south of the great temple of Ramesses III at Medinet Habu. Let's go! A well-preserved small temple, 13 by 16 meters, dates back to Roman times, erected in the 2nd century AD during the reign of Hadrian and Antoninus Pius. These were the times of the great flowering of the cult of Isis, which went far beyond the so-called Egyptus province. It spread throughout the entire Roman Empire. Temples for her were built from London to Arabia. The cult of Isis as the main universal goddess probably started before the Ptolemaic period. According to one theory, the construction of the temple was begun by Nectanebo II in the 4th century BC. He was the last native ruler of Egypt. The walls, however, were decorated with images and cartouches of Roman rulers, such as Julius Caesar, Galba, Vespasian, and Hadrian, Roman emperors as pharaohs, the so-called 34th dynasty, if we consider the Persian Achaemenids, Alexander and the Ptolemies as legitimate dynasties of Egypt. It was inside this temple where the famous hymn to Isis Aseo was performed, which, by the way, was beautifully sung at the Pharaoh's Golden Parade in Cairo on April the 3rd, 2021. May gods adore the mistress. It is she, the sole mistress. Heaven awe to Isis. It is she who gave birth to the morning. Heaven awe to Isis, the mistress of the West. It is she who gave birth to the morning. Heaven awe to Isis, the mistress of the West, and the mistress of the two lands together. Heaven awe to Isis, the mistress of the West. It is she, the eyes of Ra, greatly praised in Noms. Heaven awe to Isis, the one who grants many things to the king of Upper and Lower Egypt. Emperor Otto, who ruled only 4 months in 69, stands before Horus and Isis. The Emperor Galba before the falcon-headed Montu. Montu, the local Theban deity of war, is depicted so often that some scholars believe Isis must have shared this temple with him. The priests must have been up to date, although in Rome the power was changing rapidly. The awareness of who their current ruler was could have been an essential aspect of their religious functioning. A beautifully decorated naos, the heart of the temple, is surrounded by a narrow corridor leading to 5 tiny chapels. Just a few years ago, walking through these corridors and chapels wouldn't have been so easy, because this small temple was guarded by a huge colony of bats. In 2012, it was recognized that bats pose a threat to the painted reliefs as well as to visitors. The grand project involved the humane removal of the colony, building a new bat roost nearby, sealing the temple and cleaning the interior of the guano. The project ended with success, which makes me extremely happy because, as you know, I hate bats. Through the spiral staircase, we can get to the roof of the temple. Archaeological research proves that the temple complex was abandoned already in Coptic times, used as a garbage dump. Fortunately, the temple proper avoided the fate of other ancient buildings. It was never dismantled. On the roof we see a lot of Coptic graffiti, and more. Despite the name Deir el-Shelwit, where Deir means monastery, it seems that the monks never lived here. Originally, the temple area measured 50 by 80 meters, but apart from the temple proper and the remains of the walls, only a fragment of the propylon, a decorative entrance to the sanctuary, has survived. At its base you can see marks scrubbed off by pilgrims. For hundreds of years, faithful Egyptians tried to take home even such a small piece of the temple, like the holy dust, from its walls. We're driving through what used to be a huge artificial lake, connecting the famous palace of Amenhotep III with the Nile. I wanted to show you the greatest palace complex of antiquity, we can say the Versailles of antiquity. But it was closed for visitors and closed for camera. They told us they wanted about, 40,000 Egyptian pounds or more to enter there. And they said we could have some governmental issues then. So yeah, it wasn't worth it. But still, I managed to shoot a little bit. Scanty remains. Only the brick walls of the largest pharaoh's palace ever built, Malkata. In Arabic, Malkata literally means the place where things are picked up. It was a city within a city, the mighty palace complex of the 18th dynasty from the 14th century BC. 30 hectares of palaces, gardens and storage rooms. Another ancient gem almost never visited by tourists. This is the Ptolemaic temple of Qasr el-Aguz, literally the castle of the old lady. We're in the smaller temple near the Habu temple of Ramesses III, but unfortunately I cannot pronounce it right, so I will need a help. Could you please tell me how should I pronounce the name of this temple?
His name is Qasr el-Aguz.
Qasr el-Aguz.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Qasr el-Aguz.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go. Hidden behind a high wall, the so-called Chapel of Thoth Ibis is located about 200 meters northwest of the temple of Ramesses III at Medinet Habu. It's 400 years older than the temple of Isis, Deir el-Shelwit. It was built in the time of Ptolemy VIII, and it's even smaller. The actual temple measures only 13 by 8 meters. It is unique as its 3 oblong rooms represent different stages of the work of Egyptian artists creating reliefs. As you will surely notice, some of the reliefs are finished, others have only started to be carved, but all of them, even the unfinished ones, have been painted. There are also images simply painted on a flat wall, among them some only sketched. It's the temple of the unique universal Egyptian god, Thoth, also called Jehuti. He was the wisdom, the god of knowledge and learning, god of writing, hieroglyphs, arts, astronomy, astrology, esoterics, the god of judgment, the consort of Maat. In Egyptian myths, he often appears as a wise advisor, arbiter, and chief judge. For example, in the dispute between Set and Horus over the throne of Osiris. Pharaoh's wise actions were referred to as the actions of Thoth. He was generally imagined as a scribe, a divine secretary, rarely showing his own initiative, patron of Egypt's viziers, officials, and scribes. Here's Thoth with a beautiful Atef crown. This extensive crown consisted of, among others, the crown of Upper Egypt, the sun disk, feathers, and ram's horns. On the reliefs, it's always shown from the front, despite the head shown in profile. His manifestations are of two main types, as an ibis or ibis-headed man, and as a baboon. Thoth, god of the moon. The Egyptians used a lunar calendar throughout antiquity. Of course, Thoth was considered its creator. He was usually depicted with a lunar disk over a crescent moon on his head. As we know, each region of Egypt had its own theology, hence many contradictions as to the mythological origin of Thoth. According to one tradition, Thoth was the son of the goddess Nut or Neith, about whom I told you in the episode from Esna. According to another, he emerged from Set's skull, which was impregnated by Horus, another time born of Set's rape on Horus. Yet another myth says that Thoth had no mother, he was autogynously born. No one knows for sure when the worship of Thoth began. Already pre-dynastic finds show an ibis god. In the Old Kingdom there were already the main centers of his cult in Hermopolis Magna in Upper Egypt and Hermopolis Parva in Lower Egypt. Of course, these are the Greek names of these cities, the cities of Hermes, because the Greeks identified Thoth with him. In the New Kingdom, we find a Thoth area in almost every Egyptian sanctuary. Unfortunately, his great Ptolemaic temple in Hermopolis Magna was dismantled by the medieval Muslim rulers. Millions of mummified ibises from different periods, from the Old Kingdom to the Roman times, have been found all over Egypt. We know of large-scale bird farms for ritual sacrifice. However, the majority of sacrificial birds came from the wild. Although the popularity of the cult seems to pose a threat to the population, the sacred ibis went extinct in Egypt only in the mid-19th century. The temple was not finished. Traces of tools are everywhere on its outer walls. There are also no reliefs. However, it's been preserved in a very good condition, despite being used as a stable for hundreds of years. That's also interesting construction. Magnificent statues of Amenhotep III once guarding the northern gate of his temple precinct. It's in the shadow of these colossi that another lesser-known temple is located. We're going to see of what remained from the mortuary temple of Merenptah. Huge empty spaces in the precinct of the largest funerary temple of Thebes, the temple of Amenhotep III the Magnificent, have been waiting for development for almost 150 years. Merenptah, the son of another great pharaoh Ramesses II, finally did it. Unfortunately, his temple also shared the fate of his giant neighbor. Washed away during the floods of the Nile, gradually fell into ruin, and over time became a source of building material. Today, there are ruins surrounded by picturesque scenery. The site is now more of an open-air museum with exposed elements of the former building. Only the foundation walls and column bases remained in place. Among the relics are fragments of alabaster statues of the pharaoh and his wife, Nofret. A perfectly visible attribute of pharaonic power from the earliest times, a bull's tail, most often hanging from the back of the kilt. The rulers seated on the throne were shown with the tail at the front. It had to be visible. Merenptah or Merenptah was the 13th son of Ramesses the Great and the second great royal wife after Nefertari, Nofret. For the last 12 years of Ramesses' reign, Merenptah practically ruled Egypt. He took the throne after his father's death as a 60-year-old man. He began his 10-year reign by moving the capital from Ramesses back to Memphis. He continued the works of Seti and Ramesses, focused on the army and strengthening the empire. In the second year of his reign, around 1215 BC, he went with his army to Canaan, where the Egyptians had their first contact with the people of Israel, as evidenced by the famous stele of Maranta. We see a copy of the granite stele. The original was moved to the Cairo Museum. This is exactly where William Flinders Petrie discovered it in 1896. The text describes the victory of the Egyptians in Palestine, and it's special because it includes the first textual reference to Israel ever. The princes are prostrate, saying, "Peace." Not one raises his head among the 9 bows. Desolation is for Chehenu. Hatti is pacified, plundered is Pa-Canaan with every evil, carried off is Ashkelon, seized upon is Gaza, Yanoam is made non-existent, Israel is laid waste, its seed is no more. The mentioned Hebrews living in the hill country of Palestine are considered by many scholars to have been the same ones which were referred to in the times of Ramesses the Great as Shasu of Yahweh. According to some researchers, this semi-nomadic tribe was to seize the Canaanite cities already weakened by the attacks of the so-called Sea People. In Merenptah's time, they must have been one of the chief powers of Palestine. In 1208 BC, Libyan tribes allied with the Sea People invaded the delta, threatening the capital of Egypt. Merenptah won a complete victory over them and soon after set out for rebellious Nubia. He consolidated Egyptian rule throughout his empire and maintained the peace made with the Hittites in the time of his father. Merenptah's mortuary temple was built with materials obtained from the temple of Amenhotep III, already partially ruined at that time. Even the famous Israel stele originally contained the text of Amenhotep III. I was really planning to make an entire episode about this huge temple of Amenhotep III. The complex, surrounded by a wall, occupied 380,000 square meters. Every year I come back with the hope that this time I can see it up close. Disappointment again. Reconstruction work still continues and the area is closed. I can only show you a few shots from a distance. These are the ruins of the largest mortuary temple in Thebes from the time of the last great Thutmose, the time of the golden age of Egypt. It was on Amenhotep that Ramesses the Great modeled his gigantic images. The unusual layout of the temple, its spacious squares and so-called a solar courtyard indicated the great changes planned by Amenhotep. Little by little he was distancing himself from the powerful priests of Amun and promoting a new solar cult of the god Aten, in which the pharaoh, the living god, would have an authority comparable to that of the rulers of the Pyramid Age 1,000 years earlier. Unfortunately, the idea was squandered by his son Akhenaten, who made the new cult the only legal one in all of Egypt. His religious, cultural, and political revolution against a centuries-old civilization almost led to the collapse of the pharaonic empire. I've already told you about the singing colossi of Memnon, the pilgrimage destination of Greek and Roman tourists in antiquity. Link in the description. These are the most famous remains of the Great Temple and one of the symbols of Egypt. Behind them was a huge brick pylon, one of three, leading to the solar court and the temple proper. Each pylon was decorated with a pair of seated royal colossi, 2 pair of quartzite and 1 of alabaster ones. Many statues from the temple still adorn later Ramessidic Theban temples. Others can be admired in museums around the world. Today I showed you the little-known temples of Western Thebes. It was my first visit to all these places, a real adventure. If you're interested in these lesser-known and rarely visited ancient sites, let me know in the comments. I'll definitely find and film more of them for you. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If so, please subscribe to my channel, like and comment. It means a lot to me, as it's hard for small channels like mine to break through on YouTube. Thanks to all my patrons. And if you'd like to become one, I linked my Patreon account below. And see you on another ancient site.